Hello everyone, I'm Admiral Logan, and welcome once again to the Holy Crusade that we call the Comic Vault. Today we're going to take a look at one of those intercompany crossovers from the 90s. There were oh so many of these. This one is Batman Punisher, Lake of Fire. Lake of Fire, and this was written by Dennis O'Neil with art by Barry Kitson and James Pascoe, and this one is unusual in that it is very much about the status quo, or at least not really about it, but takes place in the very specific status quo of DC at the time. And I guess a lot of these crossovers took things that were going on into account, but this one is weird because it's not a crossover with Bruce Wayne and the Punisher, it's a crossover with Jean-Paul Valley in the Punisher, because this was in the middle of Nightfall. And these two characters sort of make sense to put together because they're both on similar crusades. They are both willing to and think that it's right to kill people who deserve it, and that that is justice, and that you've got to get people off the streets and not allow them to continue to affect the world in terrible ways, and that if you don't kill them, that you are part of the problem before you're part of the solution. And of course both of these characters have this, although unfortunately we don't really explore their similarities all that much. We kind of just put them in a book together, and I'll talk about that in a second, because we don't really get a lot of mileage out of the fact that these characters are actually kind of perfect to put together and I would think, get along better than they do. This is, just like a lot of these intercompany crossovers from the 90s, one of those books where there were, or one of the situations where there were two one-shots, and one of them was published by DC, and the other one was published by Marvel. And you had this with DC and Image with Batman and Spawn. So you had Spawn Batman, and you had Batman Spawn, and one of them was pretty decent, and one of them was awful, and the one that was awful was the one that you most expected would be really great. I don't know how exactly the other one is, because I've never read it, and I don't even think I have a copy of it, so I'll try to track that down at some point. But there is a Punisher Batman, and it is written by Chuck Dixon and has art by John Romita Jr. And I really want to get my hands on that now, because that one looks like it has the potential to be a lot better than this one, and which is not saying a lot. That's not hard. This is not great. It's not terrible, but it's kind of it's a bit of a waste, and I'll get into it in a second. This one is and I was also going to say that one looks like it's probably Bruce Wayne. I couldn't find a lot of information about it, and I don't have a copy, so I wasn't able to read it. But that showed like the regular Batsuit on the cover, so I'm assuming that that's Bruce Wayne. If anybody's read it, let me know. So, Batman Punisher, this is a really kind of typical villain plot. It's Jigsaw, and he goes to Gotham City because he thinks that for whatever reason the plan that he's got is going to be easier to pull off in Gotham City than it is in New York, and he wants to hold the city to ransom by setting all the water on fire. He's got some help, and somebody working with him has figured out a way to make water flammable, and he's going to hold the whole city to ransom by taking away their water supply by setting it on fire, thus Lake of Fire. And of course that's kind of an obvious symbol because we have this kind of holy war thing, and so he's going to kind of literally create a Lake of Fire and turn Gotham into hell, and Azrael, Batman, and the Punisher are going to get together on sort of a holy crusade in order to stop this from happening and to stop Gotham from looking like hell on Earth. And they operate, curiously, Batman and the Punisher operate separately through the majority of this. So as you're going along reading it, it never stops feeling like the same story, but it really kind of just feels like we've split these two guys off, and for part of it it's a Batman book, and for part of it it's a Punisher book. And I guess the kind of curious experience for me was that those oddly feel like reading the same book. So when you're reading Azrael Batman, he's not that far away from the Punisher. I mean, certainly he has kind of different motivations. He has a literal holy quest, and there is, as I understand it, because I don't know Punisher real well, but Punisher, it comes from a Catholic background, just like Daredevil does, I think. I know church stuff is important to some of the Punisher comics that I've looked at in the past, and the Punisher Warzone movie, I know, related to that. And the Punisher seems to, at the very least, have some respect for the church, and it bothers him when criminals don't leave churches alone. At the beginning of this, there's this part where the Punisher finds a beautiful church, he says, in the middle of a rundown area, and that really bothers him. And he says, at the very least, the consolation prize for him is maybe the criminals in this neighborhood leave churches alone. And then we have this perversion of the church when he goes in, and there's a nun that is working for Jigsaw, and isn't actually a nun, of course, that starts trying to mow him down with guns, and it turns out, of course, that no, the criminals do not have any sanctity or respect for the church. And anyway, so I guess they have that in common, that they're both maybe religious, or at least both respect both respect the idea of the church, or people who are religious and hold those beliefs. But of course, Jean-Paul Valley himself has a very specific belief system, and actually works for Saint Dumas, who is a real thing, and he's on a literal religious crusade. And we don't go into that at all, or at least we don't go into the fact that they both maybe kind of have that in common. You have Jean-Paul Valley, of course, as he always does, constantly talking to Saint Dumas and begging for forgiveness when he thinks he's failed at something, and and trying to bring criminals to justice. The weird thing is that so I was impressed with that at the beginning for putting these two guys together and not having them immediately fight. And that was a thing that this week, and of course this has been on kind of everybody's minds lately because of Batman v Superman. So it seems like we're really turning stuff on their heads and getting away from the obvious cliche tropes whenever we have superheroes who don't have to obligatorily fight. And we had that this week on, or I guess last week on Supergirl, when she meets the Flash, that they get together and they're best friends immediately, and we're able to subvert that because it makes sense for those characters. We don't have to fight just because we're both wearing a costume and it's a novelty for people to get to see superheroes fight. And of course, sometimes that's fun and sometimes it's warranted, but you got to do it when it's warranted. Well, here they get together and they have a common foe, and they both know something about each other's reputations, and they're both killers. Jean-Paul Valley, the big beef between him and Bruce Wayne is that Bruce Wayne doesn't think that Batman should kill people, and he kills people for Saint Dumas, and that's his sacred oath, right? Like that's the idea. Well, he doesn't kill people in this. And he even talks about how he usually does, and we try to come up with kind of extenuating circumstances for him not to, and I don't understand that, because it's a one-shot with the Punisher. Like, let Jean-Paul Valley kill people. There's a part where he takes the time to, I guess this is toward the end, I think it's Jigsaw. They apprehend Jigsaw, and he takes the time to rope up Jigsaw. I guess just because Jigsaw is a main villain character and you can't kill him off. Okay, well, we can contrive something that's a little bit more believable than this. So he takes the time to tie him up and leave him for the police, but he doesn't kill him, and he's been behind this whole terrible plot, and Jean-Paul Valley is kind of charged with taking people like this out again, that's his holy war. And he acts like he just doesn't have time. It's like, how does it not take more time to rope somebody up than it does to shoot them in the head. I don't understand that. I'm not saying that Jean-Paul Valley is that I condone what he does necessarily, but it's inconsistent with his character. And then he acts like he's failed at the end. I'm like, why didn't you just kill him? So he and the Punisher get together and they fight together for a minute, and then they both kind of run off in separate directions, and they meet back up at the end, and they both do different things that it's kind of a teamwork scenario, but they're working independently from each other, and they don't really have a plan. They just each have separate plans that kind of work out at the end, and they get back together at the end, and Azrael's like, I'm going to have to take down the Punisher now. I still have this beef with the Punisher, and I don't know really what that is unless he thinks that the Punisher deserves to be punished himself. And there's really not a lot of talk about that. I don't know what exactly Jean-Paul Valley knows about the Punisher or what exactly he thinks he knows. And this is a universe that just has them both in it, which I kind of appreciate. We're just pretending like the Marvel and DC universe are the same. There's a New York, there's a Gotham, you have that in a lot of DC comics anyway, and the Punisher, and I guess the idea is that the whole Marvel universe, there's no talk about any other superheroes, but I guess the idea is that the whole Marvel universe exists on New York, and then the rest of the world is DC. And, that's how it feels anyway, at least the, like, fictional, cities. And so he comes to Gotham, the Punisher, and he's heard about Batman, and Batman has heard about the Punisher, and they both, I just think that they both are on the same side and have too many of the same methods for one to really have any beef at all with the other. I don't know what the gripe is. And so then you do kind of have an obligatory fight at the end, though it doesn't last very long. And oh, that's right, there's like a gas grenade, and then Punisher runs off, and it's because like the Punisher isn't trying to hunt down Batman. Batman's trying to hunt down the Punisher, and so Punisher just escapes, and he seems to think that Batman is like doing the right thing and is on the right side of justice. And from his perspective, from his point of view. So I just don't really understand why Jean-Paul Valley is making it a priority to go after the Punisher. That's strange. Anyway, the way this book is written is odd because, and unintentionally hilarious, because with both perspectives, and this is consistent, there are narration boxes, and like with Punisher Warzone and other Punisher books, you have what looks like a journal written after the fact. So you're looking at cursive handwriting, and the Punisher, in this very noirish kind of purple prose way, is narrating his own adventure. And you have narration for Azrael Batman that is not from his own perspective, that is like, and then he goes into the building and he pounces on this guy, and so it's in, third person, limited perspective, POV. But then, what's weird is, everything, all of the exposition and information that you need from Punisher's side, that you can't get in the artwork, and sometimes that you can, I think, is in it's a little overwritten, and a lot of the stuff in this period is like this, is in the narration boxes. But Jean-Paul Valley, even though he has an internal monologue, is constantly talking to himself. And it's really funny, and I don't know why he does that. It's not thought balloons, he's just talking out loud in order to give us information. I'm like, but you already have a device for that. What are you doing? And it gets really funny. The other thing that's really funny about Jean-Paul Valley is that he has to constantly remind himself that he has Bruce Wayne's computers. And he'll be like, oh, what would Bruce Wayne do in this situation? I know! He'd use his computers! And he does this a couple of times, and he just keeps forgetting that he has computers, and then he acts like Bruce Wayne is the world's greatest detective because he remembers to use computers, and that's really funny. The art is pretty typical for the time. I'm always talking about how art from this period likes to cut corners and not put anything in the backgrounds, and that has this to a degree. But I'm sure a lot of people that are used to today's art would look at this and say that it's under detailed and that it's it's you know, just not very, it's just not spectacular. It's just serviceable, and I'm just really used to art from this period and you know, this kind of stuff for Batman. So it's just okay. And it's kind of what I would expect from this period. There are a couple of panels that I like a lot. There's an almost full page spread where Azrael Batman jumps through a skylight, I guess, or no, not a skylight. He jumps through a stained glass window in that church, and the light on that, the way the light hits him and stuff is really cool looking, and just all the shattering glass around him. That is about all I have to say about it. I thought it'd be cool to review this because we just had a Batman thing and we just had a Punisher thing with Daredevil, and since Manos reviewed Daredevil Batman, I thought it would be fun to follow that up and review Batman Punisher. And if I can get my hands on Punisher Batman, I might come in and do a follow-up and see what that's like. But I wish that we could have explored the ideologies of these characters a little bit more. If this had been Punisher and Batman, there would have been more of an argument, but then it would have been kind of the same argument that you get with him in Daredevil. So I wonder what that other book is like and how it handles that. This again is kind of two guys that seem like they ought to get along that don't, just so that the book can have them fight for a second at the end, but then that seems pointless because they do kind of get along and work together okay, and again, they both have that religious thing in common, so I wish they would talk about the whole religious crusade thing. That's going to be it for me. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Admiral Logan, and happy reading.